My name is Captain Rebecca Carter. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan, earned 2 Bronze Stars, and buried more brothers and sisters in arms than I care to count. But none of that prepared me for the wedding invitation that landed on my doorstep one rainy morning in October. There was no return address, just cream-colored cardstock, thick and expensive, like it came from a family that never looked at the price tag. My name was handwritten in elegant script, not Captain Carter, just Rebecca. I stood frozen at my doorstep, staring at the envelope as if it might explode. Inside was an invitation to my younger sister Haley's wedding. Haley, the golden child. Haley, who hadn't spoken to me in 9 years. Haley, who once told her college friends that I dropped out to join the military because I couldn't handle real school. She was getting married, and I was invited. I should have thrown it away, but I didn't, because something caught my eye. The groom's name. Robert Whitaker. The second I saw it, I felt my knees weaken. Robert had once served under my command. I hadn't heard from him in years. We weren't close, not in the way people might think. But there had been something, a kind of wordless understanding between us. And now, he was marrying my sister. Why invite me? I flipped the invitation over, searching for a clue. There was none. No note, no signature. Just the embossed words, "We hope to see you there." That phrase rang in my ears like a taunt. I sat down, the envelope still in my hands. The rain tapped softly against the windows. Suddenly, I was 22 again, coming home for the holidays in uniform. My hair was shorter, my back straighter. I remember standing in the foyer, barely inside the door, when my father said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Who let her in?" My mother didn't even look up. She just kept polishing the silverware and muttered, "She's just a lowly soldier now. Not even a proper career." The whole room laughed. That was the last time I stepped into that house. Now, nearly a decade later, they wanted me at the wedding. Something wasn't right. I placed the card back on the table carefully, like it might bite. And then I whispered to the silence of my empty kitchen, this wasn't from Haley. Because I knew her handwriting. Someone else had sent this. Someone wanted me there. And I was going to find out why. The day of the wedding, I didn't wear my uniform. I chose a dark navy suit, modest, pressed without insignias. No medals, no boots, just me, civilian, anonymous. I wanted to arrive unnoticed, to listen, to see, not to prove anything. I packed lightly, 1 bag, 1 pair of heels, 1 conviction. I was going not for closure, not for forgiveness, but to see them one last time. To remind myself why I'd chosen silence all these years. As I drove into the city, memories swirled around me like autumn leaves in the wind. The way Haley used to leave notes on my pillow when I was deployed. How they slowly stopped coming. How birthdays passed in silence. How even when I sent back photos, me helping rebuild schools, playing soccer with village kids, I got nothing but indifference. Still, I remembered her as the girl who used to braid my hair before my first dances. I held on to that. The wedding venue was one of those sprawling colonial estates, white pillars, valet parking, champagne on trays. I walked in just before the ceremony began. No one recognized me. And then I heard it. A whisper behind me, sharp, familiar. "Who let her in?" My father. He didn't even bother to lower his voice. I kept walking. My mother, standing by the front rows in a pale lilac gown, turned and caught sight of me. Her lips tightened. "She's just a lowly soldier," she said, not to me but to the woman next to her. That woman glanced at me, then looked away quickly. I found my seat not among family, but in the back corner near the kitchen entrance. My name wasn't even on the printed seating chart. Someone had scratched it in by hand next to table 12. The clinking of glasses began. Waiters moved through the crowd. Someone played soft jazz on a baby grand piano. I sat there invisible until the speeches started. First, my father, all charm and pride, toasting Haley like she'd just won the Nobel Peace Prize. No mention of me. Then my mother, speaking of grace, beauty, tradition. And today, she said, raising her glass, "We welcome a man who embodies everything our family stands for." Laughter, applause. I sipped my water. Then came the unexpected. Robert, the groom. He stepped up to the mic, adjusted his tie, looked around the room. And then he said, "Before the first dance, there's something I need to say." People quieted. My mother smiled expectantly. Haley looked puzzled. Robert's eyes scanned the crowd, then stopped. On me. I want to thank someone who's not just a guest today, he said slowly, but someone who saved my life years ago in a place none of you have ever been. He walked off the stage down the aisle. My heart raced. He stood before me, and then in full view of everyone he saluted. Gasps, chairs scraped, wine glasses clinked. My parents' jaws dropped. The same room that had once laughed at me now stared in stunned silence. And all I could think was this. This is why someone wanted me here. They say families are bound by blood. But mine was bound by appearances, and I didn't fit. From the moment I could walk, I was different. Rough around the edges, louder than most, and drawn to things girls weren't supposed to like. While other kids played with dolls, I studied tactical formations. While Haley twirled in tiaras at beauty pageants, I was outside bruising my knees, climbing trees, and building forts. I was the disappointment in the Christmas photo. Haley was everything they wanted. Golden curls, golden heart, golden grades. She won most likely to succeed at 16. She was homecoming queen, head of the cheer squad, and once made the local news for rescuing a kitten from a storm drain. My mother taped that newspaper clipping to the fridge for 3 years. Mine were burned in the fireplace the day I enlisted. My decision to attend West Point was met with silence. No celebratory dinner, no congratulations. My father's only words were, "Couldn't you just try to be normal for once?" My mother asked, "What will you wear to your sister's graduation?" "Combat boots." They didn't understand the weight I carried or the pride I felt. To them, my military path wasn't brave, it was shameful. Haley was the daughter they introduced at cocktail parties. I was the name they whispered when no one could hear. The real pain began the day I saw the family Christmas card that year. Everyone was there, my parents, Haley, even the dog. But not me. My spot on the mantle was gone, erased. As if I had never been born. As if a uniform had made me unlovable. For years I tried to bridge the gap. From Kandahar, I sent postcards. From Ramadi, I mailed photos with my squad smiles forced under dusty helmets. I told them about leading my first mission, about the baby I pulled from rubble in Helmand province. No reply, no phone calls. Just silence echoing louder than any explosion I'd survived. Haley didn't write, not once. Not a single "stay safe" or "proud of you." Her social media sparkled with brunches and beach days. In one post, I saw her caption a photo with "family forever." The irony, I wasn't in the picture, not figuratively, not literally. My mother blocked me on Facebook after I commented on it. I started to wonder if I was grieving someone still alive, because it felt like I had died to them the day I put on my uniform. And yet I kept trying. Not because I needed their approval, but because I wanted to believe that family, even the broken kind, could heal. The only one who ever responded was Grandpa. It was during my second deployment that I got his letter. I'd just come back from a long patrol, sand still clinging to my boots when the mail truck arrived. Tucked between bills and care packages was a small envelope in cursive handwriting I would recognize anywhere. "Rebecca, my girl," it began. "You may be the only Carter with guts." I remember holding the paper so tight it crinkled at the edges. He told me he watched my commissioning ceremony online. That while everyone else looked away, he saw me, really saw me. He said he kept a photo of me in uniform on his desk. Not Haley, not a family portrait. Me, alone. Standing straight-backed under the flag. He wrote, "I never got to serve. Your grandmother begged me not to, but you're living the life I wish I had the courage to choose." I read that letter at least 50 times, folded and unfolded it until the creases tore. It reminded me that I wasn't crazy, that someone in this family still believed I belonged. But then Grandpa died. And with him, the last thread holding me to home unraveled. I didn't get invited to the funeral. Haley said it was a small private affair. I later found out 300 people attended. They had a slideshow. Haley spoke. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even once. Still, I held onto his letter like a lifeline. I kept writing. One Christmas, I sent handmade cards from my platoon. Another year, I mailed home a medal I'd earned for valor, asking my mother to keep it safe. She returned it unopened with no note. Eventually, I stopped. Not because I gave up, but because I grew up. I realized that no amount of medals or missions would change how they saw me. I wasn't Haley. I wasn't soft or palatable or Pinterest perfect. I was steel in a silk world, and that scared them. The last message I ever received from my family before the wedding invitation was a text from Haley. "Don't make things weird at Dad's retirement party. Just don't come." I didn't reply. But now, here was this envelope. No sender. Just my name in calligraphy. Inside the card was glossy, too expensive. "You are cordially invited to the union of Haley Carter and Robert Whitaker." Robert Whitaker. I hadn't heard that name in nearly a decade. But I knew it instantly. Afghanistan. The desert. The day the convoy got hit. The man whose life I saved. Why would he? I sat on my bed for hours, the letter heavy in my lap. Someone wanted me there. Someone made sure that envelope reached me. Maybe not Haley, maybe not my parents, but someone. I decided I would go, not for closure, not to confront, but to look them in the eyes, all of them, and let them know I was still standing. They sat me at table 12. It was tucked away behind a pillar next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a server passed through, the smell of garlic and burnt butter drifted over my shoulder. I didn't complain. I just folded my hands in my lap, smoothed the creases in my navy blue dress, and waited. The name card said Rebecca Carter. 2 B's, 1 C. That wasn't my name. Not really. But I let it go. I had let go of so many things already. Haley looked stunning. I'll give her that. Flowing white satin-pinned curls. Laughter like wind chimes. People said she looked like our mother when she was younger. That was true too. The room buzzed with champagne and polite conversation. I recognized a few distant cousins and college friends from years ago. Most of them glanced at me, then quickly away. I wasn't surprised. In their minds, I had faded into a cautionary tale, some girl who traded makeup and boyfriends for MREs and desert boots. The best man spoke first. A few charming stories, some awkward jokes. He did fine. Then came our mother. She held the microphone like she was born for it, smiling with the confidence of someone who'd already decided she was the star of the evening. Her voice carried effortlessly. "We are so blessed," she began, eyes glistening just enough for the cameras. "Haley has always been our sunshine, our perfect little girl. From ballet recitals to homecoming queen, she's never given us a moment of doubt. And now, now she's made the smartest choice of her life. She found a man who sees her value, who treats her like a queen, who makes all the right decisions." There was a pause. Just long enough. "Not everyone has that gift for choosing wisely," she said with a soft laugh, letting her eyes glance briefly around the room. Never toward me, but close enough. The audience chuckled. She knew what mattered. Stability, integrity, a strong future, not some rebellious phase. More laughter, this time louder. The kind that rolls like thunder across linen-covered tables. I didn't blink, didn't flinch. My face remained neutral, calm. Inside, something tightened, but not from pain, not anymore. It was just a reminder, a quiet one, that I was here and they still didn't know how to handle that. A hand touched my arm, soft, hesitant. It was Aunt Lorna. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," then looked away. The speech went on for another 3 minutes. It was all sugar and glitter on the surface, but each word had an edge crafted to slice, to define the family image without me in it. When the applause came, I clapped twice, then stopped. And just like that, my mother turned her back and walked away from the mic, satisfied. But I stayed seated, still, unmoved, waiting. Because I knew the night wasn't over. It hadn't even started. Just as dessert plates were cleared, the MC tapped his microphone and smiled toward the head table. "And now, before we move to the first dance, the groom has something he'd like to share." I watched Robert rise from his seat, straighten his tie, and take slow, deliberate steps toward the stage. His face was unreadable, carved from stillness. The light softened as he stepped behind the mic, casting long shadows across the polished floor. People leaned in, phones discreetly raised, expecting a sentimental toast, or maybe even a surprise vow. A few young girls giggled, whispering about how romantic this man was, how lucky Haley must feel. I didn't blink. My fingers rested calmly on the cloth napkin in my lap, its crispness still sharp despite the warmth of the room. He cleared his throat, took a breath, then spoke. "Before I share this dance with my wife," he began, voice steady but low, "there's something I've needed to say for a long time. And tonight I choose to say it." Haley's smile froze mid-frame. She tilted her head slightly, as if puzzled by a tune she didn't recognize. Murmurs flitted through the crowd like a breeze cutting through silk. Robert's gaze swept the audience, but when it landed on me, it stopped. Dead center. For a moment, it felt like only the two of us remained in that room, like a silence wrapped around just us. There's someone here tonight, he continued, whom many of you might not recognize for who she truly is. You may think you know her, but you don't. Gasps were subtle, restrained. He was building something heavy. She isn't here for applause. She didn't come for forgiveness. And I'll admit, we didn't make it easy for her to walk into this room. My breath didn't catch. It never does. But my pulse slowed like my body wanted to listen before reacting. Robert went on. When I served overseas, I learned that you meet people who change you. People who leave a mark not because they wanted to, but because they lived with such conviction you couldn't look away. Now people began shifting in their seats. Haley's hand was now resting flat on the tablecloth, her knuckles white. Her mother leaned slightly forward, brows pinched. Rebecca Carter, Robert said, was my commanding officer in Fallujah. You could hear the sound of glasses being set down too quickly. A sharp inhale from someone in the front row. Somewhere in the back, someone muttered, "Wait." What? He didn't stop. She didn't just lead us. She saved us. She pulled 3 men out of a burning Humvee while under direct enemy fire. I was one of those men. The room was now entirely still. No forks, no laughter, just a vacuum of disbelief. And I, Robert, paused. Voice dipping. I never said thank you, not properly. And I stood by knowing what she had done, while the world looked at her and saw a lowly soldier, just someone in uniform, a background character. I felt nothing sharp, no triumph, no vindication, just a quiet ache, like someone was finally telling the truth after too many years of silence. He stepped away from the mic and walked down the stairs. Each step echoed more loudly than the music ever had. And then in front of everyone, Robert Whitaker turned to face me. He stood straight, heels together, hand to brow. And he saluted. Not like a show, not like a performance, but like a man who remembered who pulled him from fire. In that moment, no one spoke. Not Haley, not my parents, not even me. But something deep and invisible shifted in the room, like the axis of respect had quietly tilted. And for the first time that evening, I allowed myself to breathe. I watched him walk up to the stage, the chatter dying down as the guests settled into their seats for the first dance. Robert adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and took the mic. There was something in the way he stood, shoulders square, breath steady, but his eyes, they weren't on Haley. They were scanning the room, searching. Everyone assumed it would be another romantic speech, maybe a grand gesture before the first dance. Another public declaration of love. Haley beamed with expectation. But then Robert said, "Before we dance, I have something to say. Not to my wife, though she is the light of my life, but to someone else in this room. A person I've been trying to find for years." A ripple of whispers flowed through the crowd. He looked down at his hands, took a breath. Years ago, I was stationed in Fallujah. It was brutal, as some of you may know. And one night during an ambush, I was shot and trapped under the wreckage of an overturned vehicle. I felt my throat tighten. I thought I was going to die, he continued. And I would have if it weren't for a soldier, a commander. She crawled through fire, dragged me out, and carried me to safety, bleeding herself. No one knew her name. She never gave it. I was barely conscious, but I never forgot her face, her voice, her courage. He paused. The room was dead silent now. I promised myself that if I ever found her, I'd thank her properly, not just as a fellow soldier, but as a man whose life she saved. My heart started pounding. I searched records. I asked commanders. No one could give me her name. And then a few months ago, I saw a photo in an old briefing file. It was blurry, but I knew. I knew it was her. I lowered my eyes, trying to steady myself. Robert looked up, and this time his gaze stopped right on me. "She's here," he said, voice steady, "sitting in this very room." A murmur rose from the guests. Heads turned. He walked off the stage step by step, slow and sure. "She was dismissed by many of you tonight," he said as he passed the front row. "Mocked for her uniform or lack of it, for her silence, but none of you knew who she really is." He stopped in front of my table. She is not just someone's sister, or daughter, or the guest nobody wanted. He took one more step. She is Captain Rebecca Carter, and she saved my life. He stood still, then lifted his right hand sharp, precise, deliberate, and saluted. My breath caught. The room fell into a stunned hush. I didn't move. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I couldn't believe he did it. In front of them. In front of everyone. His salute held. The seconds stretched. I slowly stood. I didn't return the salute. Not yet. My voice when I spoke was quiet. You remembered. He nodded. Every detail. For a moment no one spoke. The music was gone. The laughter was gone. Just a quiet stillness that pressed against every wall of the room. Then a chair scraped back. A man in a dark suit stood. A veteran I recognized. He saluted. Another woman followed. Then a third. Before long the room was scattered with people rising. Not all, but enough. And I stood in the middle of it, not with triumph. Not with vengeance. But with the strange warm ache of something deeper. Recognition. Not just from Robert. From the world that had once turned away. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just met Robert's eyes and nodded. He lowered his hand. And for the first time in 20 years, I was truly seen. The air in the ballroom changed like a shift in pressure before a storm. After Robert's salute, silence lingered. It wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Then, like a wave breaking the first to rise, was a gray-haired man 2 tables over. His tie was military blue, his back impossibly straight. He stood and saluted. Then another. And another. Soon 4 men, 1 woman, some limping, some with medals pinned to their chests, rose from different corners of the room. Their hands raised to their brows. Their eyes on me. It was overwhelming. I didn't cry, but my breath caught in my chest. My mother's face drained of color. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand. My father, who'd always bragged about his Harvard degrees, looked like he didn't recognize the world he was in. Like the rules had just been rewritten. And Haley? She stood frozen near the dance floor. Her smile, once radiant, now twisted in disbelief. She looked at Robert, then back at me, like she had walked into her own wedding, only to realize she was a guest, not the bride. Suddenly, the sound of a chair scraping cut through the moment. A man from the back of the hall rose, not a soldier, no military badge. But something about his bearing demanded attention. He walked with a slight limp. His suit was tailored conservative, the kind you don't rent. People turned. Whispers followed. He approached slowly, stopping a few feet from me. "Captain Rebecca Carter," he asked, voice low but steady. I nodded. "My name is Franklin Elridge. I was your grandfather's attorney for 36 years. My eyes widened. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. He left behind a sealed letter, he said. He instructed me to deliver it. Only when the time was right. I believe. That moment is now. He reached into his coat and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, thick and old edges slightly frayed. I didn't take it right away. My hands felt like stone. "You don't have to read it here," he added. "But he wanted you to have it in front of witnesses." He turned to the crowd. "Because this woman, whether you understand it yet or not, is not just a soldier. She is the fulfillment of a promise, one your grandfather made with his life." He bowed his head slightly and placed the letter on the table before me. Then, as quietly as he came, he stepped back and returned to his seat. For a moment, all I could do was stare at the envelope. The seal was hand-waxed, pressed with the Whitaker family crest. I had seen it once before on the silver box my grandfather kept his medals in. Haley clutched her bouquet tightly, her knuckles white. Robert stayed near the mic, his expression unreadable. And me, I breathed. Just breathed. Because I realized this night had just begun turning into something else. Something far greater than I had anticipated. The room remained silent. No more laughter. No more whispers. Only the sound of possibility ticking louder than the string quartet could ever play. The mic was still warm when Robert stepped away. I didn't stand immediately. I didn't plan on speaking at all. But somehow, I knew it was time. Maybe it was the letter on the table. Maybe it was the salutes. Maybe it was the decades of silence finally cracking open. I rose slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the podium. Not a single camera clicked. Not a single fork moved. It was like the air had stopped spinning. The mic was taller than I remembered. Or maybe I just hadn't stood this straight in years. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, I began. My voice was calm, but I could feel it vibrating in my chest. Truth be told, I wasn't even sure I'd come. A few nervous chuckles floated more out of tension than amusement. I've been away a long time, not just overseas. Not just in deserts with no names and battles with no winners, but away. From here. I let my eyes scan the room. Faces I hadn't seen since I was 18. Some looked away, others locked eyes with mine, quietly ashamed. I served in places where pain is measured in shrapnel and silence, where the only thing louder than bombs is the absence of someone you love the day after they're gone. My hands were steady, my voice never broke, but the truth pulsed behind every word. Still, I said those weren't the hardest wounds. I paused, just long enough for it to settle. The deepest wounds, I continued, don't bleed. They don't scar. They don't even bruise. I let that hang for a beat. And then they sound like this: who let her in? She's just a lowly soldier. We don't talk about her anymore. You could feel it, a shift in the air, like an oxygen drop in the room. I saw my mother blink. My father adjusted his tie. Haley looked like she wanted to melt into the marble floor. I'm not here to blame anyone, I said. There are no enemies in this room. I took a slow breath, grounding myself. I used to write home, not for praise, not for attention. I sent letters from places like Ramadi and Sangin. Sometimes with photos, sometimes just a line saying, I'm alive. I smiled, soft, not bitter. Most of them were never answered. I told myself people were busy, that they cared, just didn't know what to say. Then I looked toward the back of the room where Franklin Elridge had sat down. And then one day I got a letter from my grandfather. He told me sometimes silence isn't absence, it's fear. People fear what they don't understand, and they turn that fear into distance. I swallowed gently. My throat burned, but not from tears. From truth finally being spoken. My grandfather reminded me that service doesn't require recognition. That dignity comes from showing up even when no one saves you a seat. The audience was still. A few sniffles. One woman dabbed at her mascara with a napkin. I nodded gently. So I came tonight not to demand a seat, but to see with my own eyes, to understand the world I left, and the one that moved on without me. My voice lowered. And to tell the girl I used to be the one who walked out of this house in combat boots and never looked back, that she mattered. Even if no one clapped. Even if she had to salute herself. A pause. No thunderous applause. No thank you for your service. Just stillness. And in that stillness, something broke open. Not a wound, but a wall. And I stood there, not as a forgotten daughter, not even as a soldier, but simply as a woman who had returned. I had just stepped away from the mic when I saw Haley grab Robert by the wrist and pull him toward the hallway behind the banquet room. Her bouquet dropped to the floor. She didn't even notice. Their faces were tense. She whispered in bursts, sharp, panicked. He stood still for a moment. Then he followed. I didn't mean to follow them, but my legs moved. Not toward the drama, but away from the stares, the heavy silence, the curious glances that pressed like weights on my shoulders. I turned into the corridor. The walls were bare, the carpet quiet. Then I heard it, Haley's voice, hushed but trembling. You ruined it. You ruined everything. Robert didn't yell. He sounded tired. No, Haley. I just told the truth. What truth? She hissed. That you had some weird army crush, that you fell for a ghost you barely knew. I didn't fall for her. He spoke calmly, but every word landed like a stone. I respected her. She saved my life. There was silence. Then you knew it was her. Haley's voice cracked. This whole time I knew the moment I saw the report, he said. The radio logs, the rescue coordination. I put the pieces together 2 years ago. Haley gasped like the wind had been knocked out of her. And you still asked me to marry you, she said, stunned. Robert stepped forward, his voice dropping. I didn't want to lie. I tried to tell you, remember? That night we fought. You said she didn't matter, that your family didn't speak her name. Your father came to me the next day. Told me if I ever acknowledged her at our wedding, he'd cancel everything. The venue, the foundation's support, my role at the board. He paused, then added with quiet weight, and you didn't stop him. Haley's voice dropped to a whisper. Because I was scared. You weren't scared, Robert said. You were ashamed. Then she said something I never expected to hear. And I wasn't supposed to hear it. I sent her the invitation, you know, Haley muttered. Robert blinked. What I sent the invite, she said. Not to honor her, not to welcome her. I just thought she'd see it, get the message, and stay away, like always. Robert's jaw clenched. His eyes filled not with tears, but with the clarity of disappointment. You used to tell me you hated how your parents treated her, he said. That you missed her when she left. That you wondered what it would have been like to grow up beside her. I did, Haley whispered. I do. But I also learned to be their favorite. And favorites don't question orders. There it was, the confession, not loud, not cruel, just heartbreakingly honest. I didn't move. I couldn't. They didn't know I was there. Robert took a deep breath. I loved you, Haley. I really did. But every time I saw your sister's name buried under silence, I felt smaller. And tonight, I couldn't live under that lie anymore. And then he said something I'll never forget. Love shouldn't make you choose cowardice. I stayed silent because I loved you. But I stood up there because I love myself too. I turned away then, not out of shame, but because I had heard enough. This wasn't about a ruined wedding. It was about the truth finally walking in, uninvited, unwelcomed, but no longer ignored. And somewhere deep inside, I felt a weight I had carried since I was 19 begin to lift. Not because I was vindicated, but because someone finally chose to see me. Not as a soldier, not even as a sister, but as someone who deserved to be known. I was on my way out of the hall, my hand already brushing the brass handle of the exit door, when a quiet voice stopped me. Miss Rebecca Carter. I turned. An older gentleman stood near the edge of the reception, holding a small leather satchel. His frame was thin but upright. His eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses, held something more than curiosity. Recognition, reverence. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said gently. My name is Charles Henley. I was your grandfather's attorney. I froze. My grandfather, I echoed. He gave a small nod. Walter Carter. He and I worked together for over 30 years. Before he passed, he entrusted me with something very specific. The satchel opened. From it, he pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, my name in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere. Rebecca. Just that. He held it out with both hands like an offering. He instructed me to give this to you directly. No mail, no messenger. Only if 2 conditions were met, Charles explained. I took the envelope but didn't speak. 1, he said softly, that he had already passed. 2, that when I found you again you were still standing tall. He looked down for a moment. Those were his words, not mine. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the seal. The paper inside was worn as if he had written it long ago and possibly read it 100 times before letting it go. The first words hit me harder than I expected. To my soldier, my shadow, my granddaughter, Rebecca. If you're reading this, then life has moved me off the board, but you're still in the game. And that's exactly how I hoped it would be. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You probably wonder why I never said more. Why I watched you walk away into the uniform without applause or support. But the truth is, I did applaud just in silence. You see, our family talks a lot about success, image, achievement. But you, Rebecca, you chose service. Quiet, dangerous, relentless service. You chose honor when the rest of us chose comfort. That's why long ago I rewrote my wishes. I paused. My hands gripped the paper tighter. The Whitaker Foundation was born out of a belief that those who build should also protect. That power means nothing if not paired with duty. I wanted someone to lead it who understood both. And after years of watching you even from afar, I realized you were the only one who ever did. This letter is more than a farewell. It is a key. When the time comes, present this to Charles. He knows what to do. At the bottom, just above his signature, were 6 simple words that undid me completely. I never stopped being proud of you. I closed the letter. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because for the first time in decades, my tears didn't feel necessary, Miss Carter, Charles said after giving me a respectful moment. I've been holding that letter for 9 years. He wrote it the day you earned your first Bronze Star. I blinked. How did he? He had eyes and ears in places you never imagined, he said with a faint smile. The quiet kind of loyalty. Just like you. He reached into the satchel again, and this time retrieved a document folder embossed with the Whitaker seal. With this letter, you have the legal authority to challenge the Foundation's succession plan. Walter Carter left explicit instructions. The one who lived in silent service, if still standing, would lead. Not by birth order, not by popularity. He placed the folder gently in my hands. My heart didn't race, my breath didn't hitch. I just felt ready, not because I wanted power, but because someone had finally seen the life I chose and honored it. And that kind of recognition doesn't scream. It salutes. I didn't walk back into the hall expecting a scene, but that's exactly what I got. The moment Charles Henley followed behind me, holding the sealed folder with the Whitaker Foundation crest, everything stopped. The music, the conversation, even the clinking of champagne glasses. My parents stood near the center of the reception, still stunned from earlier, their eyes locked on the letter in my hand. Haley, on the other hand, was quick. Her heels clicked across the floor as she rushed toward me, her expression caught somewhere between a forced smile and rising panic. "Rebecca," she said breathlessly. "What is all this? What's going on?" I held her gaze. "This," I said, raising the folder just slightly, "is what you tried to erase." Behind me, Charles cleared his throat and turned toward the nearest microphone, left on after the speeches. "If I may," he announced, "my name is Charles Henley, and I served for many years as legal counsel to the late Walter Carter, former director of the Whitaker Foundation." The crowd leaned in. Some recognized the name instantly. Others, mostly those who'd lived comfortable lives thanks to foundation grants, began murmuring. At Mr. Carter's explicit direction, Charles continued a revision to the Foundation's bylaws, was signed, notarized, and sealed. This document, he tapped the folder, was to be delivered to his rightful heir. That heir is not determined by bloodline or popularity, but by values, by sacrifice. He turned to me. "It is my honor to confirm per Walter Carter's final legal and moral wishes. The rightful inheritor and acting chair of the Whitaker Foundation is Captain Rebecca Carter." The room fell into silence so heavy it nearly hummed. My mother's face turned pale, her lips parted as if to object, but nothing came out. My father stepped forward. This is some sort of mistake. Rebecca doesn't even know how to run a foundation." "No," I said calmly. "But I know how to serve. And apparently, that's what your father thought mattered more." Haley stepped in then. Her voice trembled. "Rebecca, please. We're family. I never wanted to hurt you. I only you wanted me gone," I said. "That invitation wasn't out of kindness. You hoped I'd see your name next to Robert's and stay away." Her eyes brimmed. "I was scared he'd still care for you. That you'd ruin everything." "I didn't ruin anything," I replied. "You just never thought I mattered enough to stand in your way." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I don't need an apology," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I need the truth. And I just got it." I turned to Charles. "What happens now?" "We'll initiate the succession process immediately," he said. "You'll assume temporary authority and full voting rights at the next board meeting. The Foundation's assets, administrative access, and seal will be transferred within 10 business days." Haley let out a noise, half gasp, half sob. "You can't do this to me," she whispered. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said quietly. "This isn't revenge. This is restoration." The room still hadn't moved. Some guests looked down, others stared at me like they'd never seen me before. Not the girl in combat boots, not the soldier in uniform, but the woman who returned calm, measured, and unshaken. "I've spent years fighting for those who came home with wounds you couldn't see," I said loud enough now for others to hear. "And I never once expected recognition, but I will not apologize for finally receiving it." My parents stood frozen, not because they didn't believe what was happening, but because for once there was no way to talk their way out of it. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something rarer, stillness. This wasn't justice through anger. It was justice through truth. And as I turned to leave Charles beside me, the Foundation's future in my hands, I didn't look back. Some fights aren't loud. Some battles don't leave scars. But when you win them, the silence says everything. They didn't stay for cake, not for the music, not even for the final photos. My parents left the wedding as quietly as possible, which meant just loud enough for everyone to notice. My mother's heels clicked against the marble floor like accusations. My father's silence trailed behind her like a shadow. They didn't look at me. not even once. No apology, no explanation, just absence. I watched them go. I didn't feel victory, just finality. Then it was Haley. She lingered longer than they did, but not by much. When she approached, her hands trembled slightly, though her voice tried to steady itself. I didn't know about the letter, she said. I swear I didn't know what Grandpa had planned. I looked at her not cruelly, not even with judgment. Just clarity. You knew who he was, I said. You knew what he valued. You saw the medals he gave me, the way he'd light up when I visited in uniform. Haley swallowed hard. I thought he was just proud of you. No, I said. You thought he was just old. You thought his pride was temporary and your spotlight was permanent. She said nothing. I took a small breath, then continued. You didn't forget him, Haley. You chose to forget me. Her eyes welled up, but I had no more comfort to offer. Behind her, Robert was speaking to one of the groomsmen. He hadn't approached me since the reveal. And I wasn't surprised. He never once turned to face me after I took the letter. Not after the truth dropped like a stone into the middle of his perfect day. I suppose that's the thing about silence. Eventually, it makes a choice for you. When I left that wedding, I wasn't angry. I was empty. And I needed that emptiness. It was the space I'd been denied for years. The space to build something real. 3 weeks later, I walked into the Whitaker Foundation's conference room, not in uniform, but in something else, dignity. The board of trustees sat lined up like they always had, expectant, curious, skeptical. But this time, they had no choice but to listen. Because this time, I was at the head of the table. My name is Rebecca Carter, I said. And before you look at my resume, I'd like to introduce my team. I turned toward the glass doors. The first to enter was Lena Torres, a Navy corpsman turned nurse who'd treated burn victims in Kandahar before returning home to find her license expired, and no one willing to hire her because of a limp she hadn't earned in a gym. Next came James Holloway, a former Marine who couldn't sleep through the night. PTSD had taken his home, his marriage, and nearly his life. But he had one gift left: a brilliant mind for logistics and crisis management. And no one had given him a second chance until now. And then there was Michelle, a quiet woman, barely 5'2", with a scar down her cheek and a fire in her chest. She'd lived on the streets after being discharged. No family, no support, just memories and frostbite. They'll serve as our advisory committee, I said. Effective immediately, real people, real stories, real insight. Some board members shifted uncomfortably, others nodded slowly. And then I made the final announcement. I'm changing the name of the foundation, I said. A pause. From today forward, it will no longer be the Whitaker Foundation. Gasps, raised brows, confusion. I smiled softly. It will now be called For Those We Forgot, and Those Who Still Serve. No one clapped, but no one objected either, because they knew, and I knew, and maybe finally the world would begin to remember the ones it tried to erase. They say the ocean remembers, that the waves carry whispers of the lives they've touched. Maybe that's why I came here, to this modest cottage perched on the coast of Maine, where the horizon feels like an open hand instead of a closing door. I don't live in the city anymore. No foundation boardrooms, no polished marble floors, just salt air, the call of gulls, and the sound of girls laughing on the lawn. I run a small program here, unofficial, unpaid, but unwavering. Leadership skills for young women, many of them veterans, some of them just survivors of battles no one ever saw. We gather by the cliffs, we talk about dignity, about power, about choosing to show up even when the world says you don't belong. And in the corner of my bedroom, under a woven blanket, sits a cedar box. Inside are letters. So many letters. Some addressed to my mother, some to Haley, some to Robert, some to versions of myself I no longer recognize. I never sent them, not one. I wrote them when I was angry or broken or trying to be seen. Words that tasted like rust in my mouth but burned too hot not to release. I thought I was writing for them, but the truth is, I was writing for me. This morning I opened that box. The paper had yellowed at the edges. Ink had bled from the years, and some corners had curled like wounded wings. I read the first letter slowly, then lit a match. The flame caught, flickered, then consumed. And as it turned to ash, I didn't feel loss. I felt release. One by one I read them, not to remember but to let go. The last one was addressed to my father. 5 pages of things I once needed him to understand. But I don't anymore. I folded it back in, returned it to the box. Not all letters deserve fire. Some deserve silence. The wind had picked up by late afternoon. I stepped out onto the porch, pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. It smelled like rain, though the sky stayed defiantly blue. Across the lawn, the sea stretched endlessly, the waves crashing in quiet rhythm against the rocks. I watched a gull dive and vanish, only to reappear moments later with something small in its beak, proof that even in the stillness, life carried on. I sat in the old wooden chair my grandfather once gave me. It creaked with memory. A young girl from my program waved from a distance. I waved back. She reminded me of myself once, hardened, now healing. And as I watched the tide pull away from the shore, a single thought rose in me, clear and weightless. They once mocked me. They once treated me like a stranger. But I walked away without raising my voice. And in the end it was that silence that was honored. I don't need applause, or reconciliation, or to be written into someone else's story as the redeemed sister. I've written my own. The breeze danced across the porch again, rustling the last of the ashes I'd left in the tray beside me. They swirled once, then scattered into the air, gone. And I let them go. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.